Now, I stopped at the thrift store at lunchtime once more, which early in the week seems to be a good time to go, and I got myself another Walkman. This is, I think, a pretty big find for $6-7. Is in the early 90s, I would guess, Sony. And yeah, it's got Dolby, it's auto reverse, it's got an analog radio, it's got, I don't know what AVLS, automatic volume level sense, I don't know, but it's got a normal and chrome switch for the tape player, which is a nice touch. So, and it's got essentially tone controls, I guess, on it. So I don't know if that only operates when the mega bass is on, or what. But you know, very much an early to mid '90s Walkman. Sony's were always a little plasticky compared to some of the others, like the Iowas, which is one of the reasons why I preferred them. But it was pretty plasticky, but you know, this is a pretty good mid-range model, right? I mean, it's got all the features. It's not very thin. I liked thin, so. And I noticed after I got it, it seemed a bit heavy, and there are a pair of nickel metal hydrides in it. Well, that's a bonus if those work, right? So if you hit, I don't know if they'll be able to see this. If you hit play, and you probably can't, here, I will do this briefly. Hold the mic up. So you can probably hear there that the motor's spinning, and pretty obviously the belts are bad, so that's straightforward enough to fix, hopefully, on this model. What I haven't done, and which I'll do now, is try the radio out. So I'll plug in some headphones, find one of those, and let's see if we've got anything on the radio. Help if I turned up the volume. So the FM is working. Oh, there's mega bass. I don't know what that does. I'll have to look that up. But the radio works on FM. It's also got AM. That volume control could use a clean. Not a great AM radio, but it works. Now, I just wanted to add one thing about the presence of the batteries in it. Someone tried it, right? Those are recent batteries. They're not great nickel metal hydrides, but they certainly don't date from the 90s or early 2000s, right? I mean, in the 80s, I was using nickel cadmium batteries in my Walkman, which you had to charge every day because they didn't last at all. But they had some of advantages, including the fact that AAAs were quite expensive to buy in that period, and I was using AAAs. So someone tried this out, found out that the belt was gone, and decided not to try to replace it, and then it went off to the thrift store. So, and I've got, it's given that the radio works and everything else seems to, and it's, you know, this has been used, but this was treated nicely during its life. This got used. You can see where it got scratched from taking the belt clip on and off. This got used. This got put in a drawer and got pulled out. Someone tried it out, didn't work, off to the thrift store it went. Even though I am fairly sure I do not have the right size belts for this, and I'm hoping to have some come in the mail shortly, I decided I just really wanted to have a look inside it. And I thought I'd try to do a better job of videotaping my attempts to open this up. I will say that's not the easiest thing to do with the camera in the way, but I'll have a go. And so there's my diagnosis. Radio works, motor spins, needs belts, question mark. Almost certainly. I'm just looking around. I think this is going to be all clipped together. I don't think there are any screws at all. I know there aren't any under the tape. So let me show you the kinds of tools I use to get this open. I've had this little Tecton screwdriver set for quite a few years now. It came with a little plastic spudger, which is mostly, well, it's still a bit usable, but I don't find I use that very often anymore. But I do like this bit set. They've held up pretty well, except for this small one, which has seen some abuse, but it's not one you need very often anyway. So this is very helpful, although I don't think it's going to help right now. I have a small container of opening tools that have been acquired, often in various kits for things. So that's useful for pulling the glass off an iMac. There's a similar plastic tool. But what works 9 times out of 10 for me is these guitar pick style tools. I think they're a little softer plastic than a real guitar pick, which can be made out of fairly hard stuff. But that, and then, you know, just these little tiny screwdrivers, which you tend to get in sets. We've got too many of those, I think. But this is 9 times out of 10 for something like this. That's going to do the job. So let's have a look. I'll try to stay on camera here, or in shot, I guess. I'll just try to find a spot where I can start getting the back off here. Now, often a good place to start is around the battery. And what you're trying to do is just feel the clips release. And hopefully without doing too much damage in the process. I did try a little bit. I tried, this one is harder plastic and I felt it was going to damage it. This one's softer plastic. And with that, I was a little bit more willing to poke at it. And I've got it at least partially open here. It's making plastically unclipping noises. So that's the approach, and this plastic seems to be doing less damage, so I'm going to go off screen to do this. Okay, much plasticky noises later, and a little bit of hopefully superficial damage. What was hard about this is that there's a clip, two clips in the battery compartment, which are a bit difficult to get. I think if I were starting over, I would start there, get those clips first, and then get to it. So what's the first thing I notice is this has a tuning condenser, transformers. This looks like it's got a much more complete radio on it. I also note that the belt was right in there. It doesn't seem very stretchy, but and I don't quite know the routing, but let's see, it would need to, well, let's put some batteries in it and see what happens when we turn on the tape player and see how it spins. No. Where's the mode switch on this? There we go. Now it's in tape. So that spins. What happens when we change direction? Oh. Okay, so you can see the motor always spins in the same direction. One of these capstans has to spin one way, and one needs to spin the other. If it's going... So that tells us something about the belt routing. Okay, I think I figured out the belt routing. I did find a belt that might work. It's probably too large. It'll probably make the player play fast, I guess, but we'll see. All right, off. Okay, well, it appears to be working. I was trying to figure out why it stopped. It's in play once mode. Why would you want that? Okay, so if we get resistance on there, it should play the other side. There, the capacitor is spinning. Sure seems like it. Okay, well, I'm going to try a tape in it. As I said, I don't expect that it will play at the right speed, but and so I probably won't put the back on the Walkman until I get the right belts, but I'll put a tape in it and see how it sounds. So as has become traditional around here, we will go with Rush for the first test. When I played that, I heard a lot of noise and a lot of hum, and maybe music in the background, probably not. So what I'm wondering is if somehow the ribbon cable that goes to the head there has been damaged. See, that goes under there. And, to this. So we now, ideally, I would get 3 volts on there somehow. Alligator clips or something, and see how that goes. So I'm not at all sure that I'm going to succeed in reviving this Sony, but we'll have a go and see what can be found about it. As I said, I don't think this is the right belt, but I did look online and found the belt routing, and this is the correct routing, and it is. Like, the mechanism is working properly. Everything that's supposed to be spinning is spinning. So I think it would be helpful for me to be able to see this mechanism actually working. So open, and then we'll see if I can figure out what's causing the problem. Again, a very simple mechanism, all plastic, and you know, yeah, that little clip there has this little ribbon cable that goes to the head, and my guess is that I am hearing the sound of this real ribbon cable acting as an antenna. There's no shielding here, and as I've mentioned in previous videos, this environment with the monitor here, with the camera, a fluorescent light overhead that's got a conventional ballast on it, this is a high electronic noise environment, so it's not surprising that it would pick up some noise. And in fact, the noise sounds like the kind of noise that comes from the monitor. But yeah, so, well, that'll be fun to try to figure that out. I'm starting to feel less optimistic about the chance of succeeding. It could be a bad electrolytic capacitor, of which there are a series here. That are soldered in along there. So that would be, barring something that's obviously disconnected, that would probably be my next thought, that I could be listening to the noise of the motor getting into the circuitry here because the electrolytics are bad. What are those? (16-volt, 6.8). They're probably all the same. There's a bigger one over here. I can't see. Anyway, I'll have to look and see what they are, see if I've got anything. I do note that a number of people, even people with proper chest here, like Mr. Carlson, but also a lot of people who work on small radios, have suggested holding a capacitor over it. And I've got to say, this one over here looks a bit bulgy. And that seems to be, that's some sort of pot. That's power in, yeah, it's suggesting. I do note that we do actually have a construction date, 93/7, I guess that's 28th week. Does that work with July? I guess it could be. But I think we can believe it's 93. So I think we know when it was made. So that's fun. Yeah, so I'm like that. I don't know if you can see that, but it's domed a little bit. Normally once they're pushed in. Well, 93, lots of bad capacitors made in the early 90s. That might almost be worth trying before anything else. It's definitely something that only affects it when the cassette motor is in operation. And it wasn't, because it wasn't an issue using the radio. But if the noise we're hearing is unfiltered noise that's coming from this motor here, then that would make sense, right? The radio could work perfectly and we'd get noise from that. So, yeah, I'm going to figure something out to get power to it with it disassembled, and then we'll see what we can do. Okay, I think I've got an idea of what might be going on, and I think I've got a setup where I can demonstrate it. So I've got some leads clipped to the power terminals of the Walkman here. It's entirely disassembled. I don't have the front controls on, which might be an issue, but the sound issue was a problem regardless of whether they're on or not. And I think I need access to the back of it. So there's power through a fairly dodgy setup in these two alligator clips, and it's hooked up to some little speakers here in the background, so that hopefully I may have to move the microphone over, move the light over anyway. So let's try this. So I don't know if you can hear that. Which is the volume control here? Okay, well that's the volume control, but it's not perhaps as strong as it seemed before. So you can hear there's sound, and it's definitely affected by the motor, because if you put drag on the motor, it changes. So, and we can also stop, it goes away.
Which says, yes, American kids 5 to...
So I'm sure you could hear that even though I haven't carried the mic over, but you can hear that the FM radio and the AM radio, which wasn't tuned to anything, still works. Okay, so that's interesting, right? So the question is why, and my hypothesis is that noise from the motor, from this motor here, is not getting filtered out from, let's say, the power rail. So this capacitor is the same rating as this capacitor that's on the back here. And so what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to do what I've seen a lot of other YouTubers do over the years, which is to try to hold this capacitor in place and see if that has any effect on the sound. I'm not sure whether you'll be able to hear it with me having the mic over here, but I can't really hold it by the speakers, and and do this at the same time. So let's turn this on. So I don't know if you can hear that. There's the hum, and now I'm going to try to hold this. So I don't think you can hear that, but it reduces but does not eliminate the hum. So I think the argument that one of those capacitors is bad is fairly strong. I'm going to try to clip this mic up over here. Okay, hopefully you may barely be able to hear me, but you'll be able to hear the hum. Now I'm going to put this in place. See, it reduces dramatically. So my first attempt at trying to solve this problem is going to be to desolder this capacitor and put this one in. This one is larger than this one, but I'm thinking I can probably get away with lying it down in there by the, this is the power jack. I would use that to get the power in, but I don't unfortunately have one that size. I do actually have a power adapter from an old Walkman that dates back to the 80s that was that size, but it's been repurposed for something else over the years, so yeah. So that's what I'm going to do. So time to get the soldering iron on, and I'll be right back. This is one of those things that's hard to do on camera. I don't think you can see what I'm doing. What I'm trying to do is just put some heat on each of the terminals and wiggle it out. Not the easiest thing to do with the camera in the way. But there we go. All right. There's that capacitor out. And we just need to get these cleaned up. Now the iron is up to temperature, so we should be in business. I'm really a pretty big believer in solder braid. I didn't own a solder sucker until, well, just this week actually. Never had one. This stuff just works pretty well most of the time. You get it kind of, there we go. Perfectly cleared out. Now, since we know that that's the positive end of the battery that it's connected to over here, we know which end of the capacitor, which I've now lost, should go in there. So the positive end, there's the negative. So what I'm going to do is put it through and try to bend the leads. Maybe I should have bent them before. Let's try that again. Sorry, kind of working around the camera here. So I'm going to kind of bend the leads down like that. That should do it. It was not pretty, but it was pretty good. Okay, and so once again, we see plus is actually marked up here on the circuit board. You gotta love Japanese circuit boards. there we go. So that's the idea, and I'm hoping that will fit in the case. If not, we'll reevaluate that after. We'll just touch a little solder to that. Okay, not the best joint in the world. The leads are light enough that they don't carry enough heat to burn your fingers when you do that. Okay. And snippy snip snip. All right, so one replace capacitor with, you know, an El Cheapo from the junk electronics store. I have no idea who the manufacturer of that is, but I got a lot of them, and you know, better than one that doesn't work at all. If that works, then the question about will be to replace all these electrolytics. I'm not actually sure what the values of those are. I had trouble reading it before. Oh, 22. Yeah, 22. So those will be, I should have 22s, I'm pretty sure I do, and I don't think mine are much bigger than those, so I think they would probably do fine. So let's see if this makes any difference. I will plug it back in and try the noise test. It's improved it, but I'm not sure that it solved any problems. I think I'm going to replace the other ones, and then I'm going to have a look. My other sort of speculation is that the head's just simply detached from this little ribbon cable that appears to carry the signal. No, it doesn't. I mean, that looks fine, right? But I thought I could just have a look and see whether some of the pins are coming through onto the circuit board here. Although I could at least see if they make it as far as the connector. That would be about as far as I could get at. So I think that might be my next try, and then from there I will replace these other electrolytics, and we'll see what that does. Okay, so I did try running the meter from the pins on the back of the head to, I don't know if you can see them, these little pins here which come off the cable connector. And I didn't test all of them, but I did find 2 or 3 definitely have continuity between the head and here, including the one that looks like the ground. So I'm pretty sure, this is the ground here, which is, oh, I've lost track. This pin here on the end. But I'm pretty sure that this connection is fine, or at least most of it's fine. And so I also note that I found 2 more electrolytics which I hadn't noticed before, which are these 2 here, and actually that one's not looking too happy. And those are, and so if I'm guessing that this is the audio out here, right? Sorry, I'm out of frame, but this is the audio out here. It comes out of the cable, comes into some of these tracks along here. N minus right, anyway, reference, anyway, and that looks like it might come over through some filtering into that chip. I'm guessing that's the radio one because it's got all the radio components around it. So right over here are 2 electrolytics across the ground plane that goes right into that audio connection. And I don't know, those seem pretty likely to me. Anyway, I'm going to have a look at what they are and how they're oriented and see if I've got anything to replace them with. But as I said, no continuity issue here. And so, and again, if it's anything, any of this surface mount stuff on here, I mean, I'm just out of luck, right? I'm not going to find it, nor am I going to replace it. I'm going to end up irritated and put this in the doesn't work pile and possibly use it for parts on another one later on. But if it's electrolytic capacitors or that sort of thing, then I do have some hope in fixing it. I want to point out just how nicely made this is compared to, because I've looked at a lot of junky radios and whatnot on this channel. Look, even the ferrite rod, they've put it down into a plastic holder. We don't have the tiny little wires just taped across the board and haphazardly. They go into that. They go into 3 nice little terminals there, right? It might be plasticky, but it's beautifully designed. And and here we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, well, 3 transformers, a couple of inductors of some sort, yeah, this is nice, right? And it's all pretty nice. It's like Sony made good stuff back in the day. That's great. Look at this, even a little bit of goop put over the test points there. That's good. Okay, desoldering capacitors continues. Okay, well, I have replaced all the capacitors. That's all of these ones. Oh, one's rolled away. With new ones. I'm not entirely sure that the new ones will fit in the case if I try to put it together, but I'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I've got power to it, and we'll see. Well, let me move the microphone here. If I go right up to the speakers, there's a little hum. But it's more reasonable at more reasonable volume levels. So maybe this has worked. Let's put a tape in. Well, I don't seem to be able to get a tape into it without more of the case being in place. And I do realize that one of the reasons I might be getting no audio signal from the tape deck is the lack of that being in place. I'm actually kind of surprised that if I flip it over to radio, that works, or did work. Oh, well, it won't when my power supply drops off.
Weather together on the ones. It's Kyle Hawking.
This report brought to you by Diamond and Diamond Lawyers. We've got a collision on the owl.
But it's quite possible. It's quite possible that the radio is in fact not connected to that circuit at all. That the radio may be operating relatively independently of the tape mechanism. So I don't know. I assume that's the radio. The chip numbers should be visible there, right? And I'm guessing that's the tape player amplifier, and maybe that's the amplifier chip down there. Who knows? But those chip numbers could be looked up. Anyway, I'm going to make an attempt to put it back together, and again, I'm not entirely sure it'll work. These stick out quite a bit more than the original one said. That's down. But these are up above the edge of this mechanism, so it might not work. Hopefully, my phone's complaining about low power, so hopefully that didn't interrupt the video there, but we'll see. So, short answer, it works. The belt is not the right size. There are some issues with the with wow and flutter, which I think are caused by that, and the speed seems slightly off to me. I also, unfortunately, appear to have broken one tab over here that's kind of crucial. Again, since this isn't going to go to anyone but me, I'm going to get some new. When I have the proper belt, I will probably glue that and call it a day. But just to show you for a moment. Dolby on and off, the bass on and off. Anyway, before Getty comes after us. But it works, and it's not pretty. I did a little bit of damage to it opening it up, but we'll clean up and clean the heads and get the right size belt for it, and this is a pretty good player. And that'll give me a couple that are workable with this one. You know, there's actually some high frequencies in this, unlike the other ones that I've worked on. This is all right, right? It's actually, there's a point to having Dolby on this. And learned a lot about this. And I should say, my capacitors, I went as close to the values as I could with what I had, which wasn't perfect, but seems to have worked. I don't hear any noise in it. It works fine. So I'm really quite pleased. I think we can see that the problem with that were these little things, and I'm going to put some of them in a component tester in a few minutes and see what that tells us about them and whether they're all bad or not. I mean, clearly one of them was, but the others, who knows? I did test all the capacitors using this little tester. These are the good ones, and those two are the bad ones, including one that the little tester wouldn't even recognize as a capacitor. It's probably open. So those two were the problems. Those are both really, really gone. It's been a number of months since I last worked on this Sony Walkman, and I'm just going to remind myself what I did with it last time. Last time I replaced the belt with what is probably the incorrect size, so I now have new ones, so we're going to try those. The other thing I did is, because there was a fair amount of hum in this machine, I recapped it. And these are the original values that I replaced with, well, the closest values that I had that would fit inside what's a fairly small spot. I should say, with all of these things, I'm not really intending them to go on beyond me, and I did make a mistake when I did this the first time, which was twofold. First, I tried to open this up on camera, which was probably a mistake. And the second thing is that this black plastic, which this 90s Sony is made out of, is significantly more fragile than the clear plastic of the Iowa, for example, and some of the others, like that Panasonic that I worked on, which you could really just cram at it to get it apart. This one I did break off a tab. So it's possible that I've got a cap that's sticking through that's holding it out, but I think I broke off a tab in here. This is not staying shut entirely properly. I think what I learned from that is that if one's going to open something like this up, do it off camera with a little bit more care as opposed to trying to do it quickly on camera. I should say this is a reasonably desirable Walkman. As I believe I said earlier, this is one I would have bought myself in this era. Although it's a little bigger, I've tended to like the small ones. So this is the WM FX39. There are a few of these floating around on eBay. There are even a few new in box, although I would expect you'd still have to do the belts on that probably. But and maybe even the caps. I don't know how badly they would decay if they weren't used. Unfortunately, this mid-90s period is a period of bad capacitors everywhere. So that's mid to late 90s. So that's something to keep in mind. But I would say if you wanted one now, this would not be as expensive as, you know, some of the Iowas that are fairly desirable right now. And and some of the more well-known Sony. So I think this would be a good one to buy if you wanted one to use. It would certainly be fairly high on my list. And not that I have a lot of taste, but this one I intend to use if I get the wow and flutter situation taken care of. So let me get it open and I'll get right to putting a new belt in, and we'll see if I can do that. Okay, the real convenient thing about this one is that once you do get the back off, and it comes off easily enough once you know where the clips are. And actually, if you look at this case, if you're opening one of these up, maybe take this case is, I'll turn it over, right, battery compartment at the bottom this way. Here, if you have one of these you want to open up, you can see there's the one I broke off, right there. And these are the rest of the clips on the way around that holds on. I would have thought I'd broken one off on this side too, but I don't see that. So maybe I have a better chance of getting this back together without as much trouble as I thought. But the advantage is once you get that off and you're back inside, one of the things you have is the belt is just right there. So, yoink that right out. And then, see, that one is a bit thick. Let's see what we got. And these size down, that would be, that's pretty close. Let's see what the next size up. That one, is there an intermediate size? No, it appears to be the big one again. Okay, so we'll see which one of those fits. The original belt had totally disintegrated, so I'm guessing as to belt size, this is what I ended up putting on. I think in general you would want to use this as a thin one as you can get away with, or smaller one as you can get away with. And I believe this is how it went, but I may refer back to the video to make sure I'm correct about that. If I'm putting it on wrong, I'm sure you can yell into the netherworld of the internet. That looks right. Anyway, I think that belt seems much better. That seems to fit nicely within. I can still feel all the pulls of the motor as I turn it, which suggests that it's tight even with that too. So I don't think there's any slipping. I do wish these were a little better quality than they are, but okay. Well, I think I will put some batteries in first just to make sure it's working, and then we'll apply some power to this and try my rush tape or something like that and see what we can see. So as you can see, I have some earphones around and was giving this a bit of a try, and it does seem to pass the rush test. There's still a little bit of wow and flutter on it, but it's greatly reduced. It's certainly running at about the right speed, or as close as I can tell. Bytar and the Snow Dog agree that it is working just fine. I will say, trying a classical tape, the Planets, which is a pretty hard test, and this one did live in my car for a while, so let's, not sure how good shape the tape itself is, but with that one there still is a fair amount of, I'd really say flutter, not wow. I don't think the problem is in the belt. I do wonder if there is a flat spot on pinch reels. So, the way you end up with a flat spot on a cassette player is by leaving the button pressed without the motors turning. And that's what happens when you put it aside and throw it in a drawer and the button gets clicked down. So that might work its way out. It's a perfectly fine rock and roll Walkman at the moment. I don't think I think it would be irritating for classical music. But my impression after listening to it for a little while is that it's either calming down or I'm becoming more tolerant of it. So I think this is going to be a player. I think this is going to be a totally usable tape player for the kind of casual use I'm intending to use it for. I should point out that I did use a single drop of super glue to replace the spot where I broke a tab off. So my advice to anyone who is working with one of these is to be very careful. The plastic on these things is pretty fragile. The recapping job worked pretty well. You can still hear some noise, maybe, and certainly when it's in rewind. Again, it's clearly motor noise from the player making its way into it. But all in all, my rather quick and dirty recapping job does seem to have worked. It is a workable Walkman. This is actually the most complicated one I've had to do so far. The interesting thing about this is the belt itself is dead easy because, you pop off the back. Well, as I said, be careful, but pop off the back and it's right there, and it's just a little short one. And it does appear that the 0.7 millimeter is the correct size for this one. So I would say, again, if you can get your hands on one of these for a good price, it would be worth a try, especially if you have some old tapes that you might occasionally want to revisit. That was a fun one to work on. I'm quite happy with the result. As always with these projects, since I'm, as I've said, a rank amateur at this, I've learned a lot. And certainly if I were to tackle another one of these, I think I could do it much more easily the second time around. So thanks for watching, and hopefully this has been helpful to somebody.